How can you securely work with application secrets in production? One of the best solutions in the .NET ecosystem is Azure Key Vault. In this video, I'll show you how you can create your first Key Vault, how you can store your application secrets, and how you can retrieve them in your .NET applications. We're going to start from the Azure portal. I'll go into Key Vaults. If it doesn't appear here, you can search for the Key Vault service in the search tab. And once you're inside here, you want to click Create to create your first Key Vault. This is a managed service that allows you to securely store some sensitive values such as encryption keys, application secrets, and even certificates. It's useful for many reasons. It implements security best practices so that you don't have to worry about it, and it allows you to centralize your secret values. To create your first Key Vault, you want to choose your resource group. I'm going to use the one that I use for my YouTube videos, and then you need to input a name for your Key Vault secret. So let's call this YouTube Key Vault, and then I'll say first. Now this value has to be unique, so you may need to do a few trial attempts. And for the region, I'm going to choose Germany West Central. For the pricing tier, I'm going to choose standard. The next option is if you want to use soft deletes for your Key Vault data, including your application secrets or not. By default, is going to be enabled. And the retention period before something is hard deleted is going to be 90 days. I'm going to leave the default values in place and click Next. When it comes to access configuration, it's recommended that you use role-based access control. So we're going to configure the required roles a bit later. I won't change anything here and click Next. We're going to enable public access. So again, I won't be changing anything. I'll click Next. I don't need any tags. And finally, let's review what we put in. And if we're happy, we're going to click Create. So now we have to wait a couple of moments for our new resource to be deployed, and once it's ready, we'll be able to access our Azure Key Vault. After a couple of moments, you'll get a message that the deployment is complete, and you can click this button here to head over to your new resource. Now, what are some important things you have to be aware of? First, you're going to need the Vault URI, which you're going to specify inside of your .NET application to connect to your Key Vault instance. Secondly, let's deal with the role-based access control. I'll go into access control IAM, and here I want to go into role assignments. So you can see I have my default user as the owner, but what you will need for your .NET apps is to add a role assignment, and the roles you're going to require are going to be Key Vault Reader. I'm going to check that, click Next, then I'm going to say user, group, or service principal and select my one user, and then let's head over into review and assign, and I'm happy with this, so I'm going to add the role assignment. The Key Vault Reader role is going to allow the authenticated user to list Key Vault secrets. And then you need another role assignment for your identity to be able to actually access the Key Vault secret. This role is Key Vault Secrets user, so I'll click Next and select the same member, and then let's assign this. And now when I authenticate with Key Vault using my user, I'll be able to access the Key Vault secrets. You can also create a special managed identity and assign the required roles to be able to properly access your Key Vault instance. So now that we have this taken care of, we'll be able to authenticate with Key Vault from our .NET app, and let's discuss what you can store inside of Key Vault. So there's three types of objects that you can store. First, there is encryption keys, then there is app secrets, and finally certificates. The one we are most interested in is storing secrets. Now, if you try to create a secret, you're probably going to fail at this point because you need another role that's required to actually create secret values. I'm going to add that quickly. Let's go into roles, add role assignment, and the role that you need is Key Vault Secrets Officer. I'll click Next, select my user, and then I'll click Review and assign this role. And now we should be able to create our secret. So if I click Generate and we give our secret a name, let's call it Test Secret. I'll add the value as 123. You also have an option to set when the secret becomes active, when it expires, if it's enabled or not. And once you're happy with everything, you can click Create and you should be able to see your first secret. You can go into the secret and view the secret version. If I click on the current version, I can scroll down and actually view the secret content, which is just 1, 2, and 3. What's also interesting is that you can create a new version for the secret. Let's say that the new secret value is now 1, 2, 3, 4. If we create it, the old value doesn't actually get overwritten. Instead, it's versioned, and by default, you always want to access the current version. So that's the high-level intro. Now let's jump into our .NET application and see how we can actually read our secret values from the Key Vault. One thing to note is if we go into the Overview tab, we're going to need this Vault URI, and I'm going to just copy this so that I have it in my clipboard or when we configure it in our .NET app. Here's the .NET application we're going to use. it integrates with Azure Service Bus using the Service Bus client, and we are missing the connection string. Now we're going to get this value directly from Key Vault. I'll show you how, but let's start with a simpler example. And first, let's actually integrate the Key Vault service. So inside of app settings, I'm going to define a new section. Let's call it Key Vault. And I'm going to define the Vault URI and replace the value here with the value that I have in my clipboard. So this is the Key Vault instance that we're going to connect to. Now we will need some NuGet packages, and I'm going to browse for Key Vault. And the one you want to install is Azure Security Key Vault Secrets. This allows us to work with secrets. You can see there's a respective one for certificates and keys. And one more that we want is Azure Identity. This will allow us to authenticate with Key Vault. So let's install the latest version. And now I can go back to my application and let's expose a simple endpoint. I'll say map get. Let's say the route is secrets. And in the request delegate, I'm only going to access the configuration instance. And what I want to do inside is instantiate a new secrets client. This is the abstraction that gets exposed to us from the Key Vault secrets library. And here we have to specify a URI pointing to our Key Vault, as well as the credentials for authenticating. So the URI is going to come from configuration, and then we want to access Key Vault and the Vault URI value. I'll say that this can't be null. And the second value is the Azure credentials. I'll specify the default Azure credential as the value, and then you need to separately authenticate with Azure. The simplest way is using the CLI and typing in AZ login. Then you can authenticate through the UI, and these credentials get stored locally, and you can use them inside of our .NET applications. And now that we have the secret client, we can say secrets client get secret. I'll use the async version, and I'll have to update my request delegate to support this. So let's make it async, and then we'll say await here, and we want to specify the secret name. So in our case, we'll specify test secret, and what we get back is a response containing the Key Vault secret. So let's rename this to be our response object. And what we actually care about is the secret value. So let's return the entire secret value as the response of this endpoint. And I'm going to place a breakpoint here and start my application. So let's send this request from Postman, and we land on the breakpoint where we're going to instantiate our new secrets client. Now, if I test out what we get back from the configuration, you can see that this is our Key Vault URI. So this is going to work. And then, of course, I authenticated locally with Azure. So the default Azure credential is going to pick up on that. And we get back a secrets client. And now we have our secrets client instance that we can use to send a request to Azure. Now, this may take a couple of moments to load the secret. And eventually we get back a response. I'm going to press continue, and we get the response as a JSON object inside of Postman. So you can see what this looks like. Now, what we are interested in is the actual value. This is what you want to use in your applications, and the value here is decrypted, and it just says 1234, which is what I specified inside of my Key Vault. So this is the simplest option that you have. Now, let's take it up a notch. Let's say I want to specify some sort of connection string. Well, I can do that by defining a secret, giving it a name, and then here I would have to resolve my secrets client and use that to fetch the connection string. Now there's another extension library which is specific to ASP.NET Core. I'm going to install it, and let's look for Key Vault extensions. And the one we want to install is Azure Extensions ASP.NET Core Configuration Secrets. I'll go ahead and add the latest version of this library. And once we have this, here's how you can configure it. So you have to say builder configuration, and I have a new extension method called add Azure Key Vault. And here you can specify the same arguments like we did when creating a new Key Vault instance. And I just have to update how I'm accessing the configuration value. And then this is going to set up my secrets client. And what's interesting about this is it's going to add a configuration provider that can read values directly from Key Vault. So this means you can continue using your application just the same as you did before when working with iConfiguration, and everything gets retrieved securely from Key Vault. So this means that we're no longer specifying any app secrets inside of our application settings. And how you can use it is, let's say, builder configuration. This is the code where I'm registering my service bus client, and I can say get connection string. Now, let's say the connection string is Azure Service Bus, and I'm confident this won't be null. So then let's do the same in my other application. I'll update the code snippet here. And I also want to add the relevant code for adding Key Vault. Of course, I'm missing the NuGet packages, so I'm going to add them in. And now my code should compile, and both of my applications will attempt to fetch this connection string from Key Vault directly. But how does this work? How do we resolve a connection string called Azure Service Bus from the Key Vault secrets? Well, first we need to create this secret. From my Key Vault instance, I'll go into secrets and let's generate another one. I'm going to call this connection strings. So this is how .NET resolves connection strings, and I'll use 2 dashes. This can be resolved to a colon, which isn't supported in Key Vault names, but the extension library that we installed will know how to map this into a secret name. So then we have to call this the Azure Service Bus connection string, and let's pass in our secret from an actual Service Bus instance. I'll copy the primary connection string, and I'll pass this as the secret value. I'll create it, and we now have our new secret in place. So now let's go back to our application. I'm going to place a breakpoint here and here, where we are fetching this value from configuration, and when the application starts, we'll hit this breakpoint. And if I try to grab the connection string, so now if I try to start the application, we're going to land on this breakpoint, and after I go over this line of code, you can see that my connection string has a value, and this is actually returned directly from Key Vault without us having to specify it anywhere inside of our application settings or an environment variable. So if I press continue, my application is going to start, and I'll be able to connect to my Service Bus instance. So let me show you quickly what this looks like. I'll send this request to my API to create a new order, and we first hit the breakpoint to register our Service Bus client in the API, and you can see the connection string is resolved again. Now I'm going to press continue, and you can see that we hit another breakpoint. And this is actually my order notification background service that's listening for messages on my Service Bus queue. The actual breakpoint is in the process message async method. The source value is queue, which means the message came from the queue. I can deserialize this, and we should get the order event containing the details for our new order. And we're just going to log this and acknowledge that we got this message from the broker. Now, what's important here is that we can continue using the configuration interface and the abstractions that are familiar to us while pulling the values securely from Key Vault. And let me show you one more thing that might be interesting. I'll do it in the notifications project, and I'll just define a simple class here, which I'm going to call connection strings. Let's say the only property we have is called Azure Service Bus, and what I want to do is say builder services configure. I'll specify the connection strings class, and then I have to say builder configuration and define the configuration section. Let's call it connection strings. And then we can use this as an options object. So what we have to do is here, we're going to say get required service, and I can say I options and specify the connection strings options, access the value, and now we have the connection strings object. So then I can use this to actually specify the Azure Service Bus connection string. Now, in order for this to work, I do need to define another connection string, which will follow this naming convention. So connection strings as the first key, and then Azure Service Bus. So let's test this out. I'll go into my Key Vault secrets, click generate, define a name of connection strings, and then Azure Service Bus. Let's use a proper connection string. Let's say the secondary one. I'll add it here, and then let's create this. And now when we start the application, everything should be configured correctly, and we should be able to access this from our options object. I'm just going to start the application with the breakpoint placed here, and you can see we land on this breakpoint. And if I try to resolve the options object from my application services and examine what we have here, you can see that the one property that we have contains a valid connection string value. So we managed to pull this using Azure Key Vault, and we can still use the options pattern that we are familiar with, while this library takes care of connecting us to Key Vault to pull the actual secret values. Let me know in the comments which Azure service I should cover in a future video. If you want to learn more about Azure Service Bus, take a look at this video next. Make sure to smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm. Thanks a lot for watching, and until next time, stay awesome.